My husband filed for divorce on a Monday morning, and he did it the way a man does when he is certain he has already won. No shouting. No warning, really, though I had known for months. Just a process server on the front porch at 9 a.m. while the kids were at school, and a manila envelope, and my husband of 19 years standing in the driveway pretending to check his phone so he would not have to watch my face. He thought he was, "Hi, I'm Ethan Cole, and this is Ethan After Dark, where I tell stories of betrayal, family secrets, revenge, and sweet justice." Now back to the story, watching a woman's world end. What he was actually watching was the last move in a game he did not know he had been losing for 6 months. Because Mark had spent 2 years quietly moving our money somewhere I would never think to look. He had planned this the way he planned everything, carefully, confidently, several steps ahead. And the whole plan rested on one belief that he had held so long he no longer questioned it. That I was just the wife. Just the one who ran the house and raised the kids and did not understand money. He forgot, because it was convenient to forget, that before I ever became the woman he underestimated, I was the one who kept the books. Let me back up, because you have to understand how a smart woman lets herself be made small, and how she stops. When Mark and I married, I had the head for numbers. That is not me bragging. It is just true, and it matters to the story. I had worked in accounting before the kids came, and in the early years it was me who did our taxes, balanced our accounts, tracked every dollar of a young family's tight budget on a spreadsheet I updated every Sunday night. Mark used to joke that I was the CFO of the household. I liked it. I was good at it. I knew where every cent went. Then the children came, 3 of them across 5 years, and I stepped back from paid work to raise them, and slowly, the way these things happen without anyone deciding them out loud, Mark took over the finances. His career was climbing. He had the business accounts, the investment accounts, the big picture, and it made sense, everyone said, for him to handle the money since he was the one making most of it now. I let the Sunday spreadsheet go. I stopped looking at the statements. Not because I could not understand them, but because I trusted him, and because when you are exhausted and raising 3 children it is a relief to hand one heavy thing to someone who says he has it. That is the quiet trap. It does not feel like losing power. It feels like being taken care of. I want to be fair to Mark, because bitterness is easy and I have children who share his blood and I will not raise them on poison. For a long time he was a good husband or a good enough one, and a present father, and I do not think he set out on our wedding day to become a man who would try to cheat the mother of his children. People rarely set out. They drift, one small justification at a time, until one day they are standing in a place they would have been horrified by at the start. What changed him, I think, was somewhere between his success and a woman named Danielle who worked in his office and was 29 and made him feel like the man he used to be. But I am getting ahead of myself. The point is that for years I did not look at the money because I trusted him and he knew I did not look, and somewhere along the way that trust stopped being something he honored and started being something he used. The first thread came loose the way these things always do, by accident, on an ordinary afternoon. A statement came in the mail, a paper one, from a bank we did not use, addressed to Mark. I would not have thought anything of it, except that it was thick, and it had slipped half out of its envelope, and a single line caught my eye as I moved it to his desk. A business name I did not recognize, an LLC, with a balance next to it that made me stop in the kitchen and stand very still. I did not open it. I want you to understand the discipline of that moment, because everything turned on it. Every instinct in my body wanted to tear it open, and then to confront him at dinner, to wave it in his face and demand to know what it was. But some older, quieter part of me, the part that used to reconcile accounts to the penny, said no. Not yet. If you show your hand now, you learn one thing and he learns that you are looking. And the moment he knows you are looking, everything you cannot yet see disappears. So I put the statement back exactly as I had found it, half out of its envelope, angled just so, and I set it on his desk, and I said nothing at dinner, and I smiled, and I passed the potatoes. That was the night I stopped being the wife he thought I was and started being the accountant I used to be. Here is what I did, and I did it slowly over months because slow was the only way to do it without being caught. I did not snoop into things I had no right to, but I was still his wife, still on the joint accounts, still a party to our shared financial life and our tax returns, and there is a great deal a spouse is entitled to see if she simply looks with open eyes. I started looking again, quietly, on Sunday nights, after the kids were asleep and Mark was out at the gym or grabbing drinks with the guys. I sat down at the kitchen table with the laptop, the way I used to, and I began, methodically, to reconstruct the picture of our finances that I had handed away years before. And the picture did not add up. I mean that precisely in the way an accountant means it. Money was leaving our joint accounts in amounts and rhythms that did not match our life. Transfers to that LLC I had never heard of. A business expense pattern that had nothing to do with any business I knew of. Our investment accounts, which I could still see, were somehow smaller than they should have been given what I knew we put in, as if funds were being routed away before they ever landed where I could watch them. Mark had told me, more than once that year, that things were tight, that a couple of his deals had gone sideways, that we needed to be careful. And I had believed him and tightened the grocery budget, while somewhere a hidden account grew fat on the difference. He was not just having an affair. He was building an exit. He was hiding money, undervaluing his business, and setting the stage so that when the divorce came on his timing, he would look like a man of modest means and I would look like a dependent wife with no claim to what he had squirreled away. I did not confront him. I have said that already, but I want to sit on it because it was the hardest thing I have ever done and the smartest. Every day I made his coffee and packed the kids' lunches and asked about his day and let him believe he was managing a woman who suspected nothing. Every day he came home to a warm house and a wife who smiled, and every day he felt a little safer, a little more certain that his careful plan was working. And every one of those days I was quietly, patiently, gathering. Because here is the thing I understood that he did not. The person who files first thinks she controls the story, but the person who is ready first controls the outcome. Mark thought his advantage was that he would surprise me. My advantage was that I would let him. I found a lawyer first, well before he ever filed. Not a shark. A steady, sharp woman named Denise who did complicated divorces and had seen every trick a hiding spouse could try. And on her advice I found a forensic accountant, a profession I had not known existed until I needed one. A quiet man who did for a living exactly what I had started doing at my kitchen table. Only with subpoena power and a trained eye. I gave them what I had, the statements, the patterns, the name of the mysterious LLC, and I watched two professionals lean forward in their chairs, because what looks like a mystery to a betrayed wife looks like a familiar and provable crime to people who do this every day. It took time, and I want to be honest that the waiting was its own kind of agony. For months I lived a double life inside my own marriage, smiling at a man I was quietly building a case against, lying awake beside him, wondering if he could feel the change in me the way you feel weather coming. He could not. That is the terrible gift of being underestimated. You can stand right next to a man doing the one thing he swears you could never do, and he will not see it because he has already decided who you are. The forensic accountant traced it all. The LLC that Mark had set up as a place to divert income, so it would not show on our joint accounts or, he hoped, on the divorce's radar. The business he was deliberately undervaluing, delaying contracts and deferring income so that on paper, right at the moment of divorce, it would look worth a fraction of its real value, with the plan to let it magically recover once the settlement was signed. The money moved to accounts in only his name. Even, and this is the detail that told me exactly who my husband had become, some funds routed toward Danielle, the 29-year-old from the office, gifts and a lease and the beginnings of a whole second life, all of it paid for with money that legally belonged to our marriage, to our children's future, to me. I had it all. Documented, traced, dated, verified by a professional whose report would stand up in front of a judge. And Mark had no idea. He was still checking his phone in driveways, still telling me things were tight, still, in his own mind, several steps ahead of the little woman who did not understand money. I want to tell you about the children because they were the reason I did all of it the slow way instead of the loud way, and because they are the part that still costs me something to remember. There were nights during those months when I would stand in the doorway of my kids' rooms and watch them sleep. 3 children who had no idea that their father was quietly trying to steal their future out from under them, and I would feel a rage so pure and so cold that it frightened me. It would have been so easy to let that rage out, to confront Mark, to blow the whole thing up in a single furious evening and feel, for one night like I had done something. But an explosion would have felt good for an hour and cost my children everything. A quiet, patient case would feel like nothing for months and then secure the roof over their heads. So I chose the quiet. I chose it for them every single night in that doorway, and I would go back to bed beside the man I was building a case against. And I would lie there in the dark and remind myself what I was really protecting. And I learned something in those months about the difference between anger and aim. Anger wants to be seen. Anger wants the other person to know right now how much they have hurt you, and it will trade a whole war for the momentary satisfaction of that. Aim is different. Aim is willing to be invisible. Aim will let a man believe he is winning for as long as it takes to make sure he is not, because aim understands that the goal was never to feel powerful, it was to actually be safe when the smoke cleared. I had spent a decade being angry in small, swallowed ways, resentful about the spreadsheet I gave up, about being talked over at dinner parties about money I understood better than the men explaining it to me. That anger had gotten me nothing. It was only when I turned it into aim, cold and quiet and patient, that it became worth anything at all. There is a strange intimacy in gathering evidence against someone you share a bed with. I knew Mark's habits better than any investigator ever could. I knew he checked the same 3 accounts every Sunday night and never the joint savings, because he had stopped thinking of it as real money years ago. I knew he kept the New Banks app in a folder on the second page of his phone, behind the weather. I knew, from 19 years of marriage, exactly which lies he told with his hands still and which with his hands moving, and in those last months I got a terrible education in watching him lie to me at dinner with his hands perfectly practiced still. He had gotten good at it. He did not know I had gotten good at watching. That was the whole marriage by the end. 2 people who had each quietly become an expert in the other, except that only one of us knew the studying was happening. I did not gather one thing I had no right to. That mattered to me, and it mattered to Denise because a case built on something you took improperly can collapse no matter how true it is. Everything I assembled I was legally entitled to see. Joint accounts, shared tax filings, the financial life of a marriage I was still, in the eyes of the law, a full partner in. Mark's mistake was never that he hid the money somewhere I broke into. His mistake was that he hid it in plain sight and simply assumed I would never look, because for 10 years I never had. He built his entire fortress on the foundation of my inattention, and he never once noticed the day the inattention ended. So when the process server came on that Monday morning, and Mark stood in the driveway pretending to check his phone, waiting to watch my world collapse, he saw me take the envelope calmly. He must have thought I was in shock. He must have driven to work that day feeling sorry for me, or relieved or victorious, certain that the papers he had filed described a marriage of modest means and a wife who would take what little he offered and be grateful. He had filed a financial disclosure that hid the LLC, undervalued the business, and made no mention of the diverted funds. He had, in a legal document under oath, lied about our money. And that, it turned out, was the best thing he ever did for me. Because a betrayal whispered at a kitchen table is one thing, and a lie sworn to a court is another thing entirely, and my husband had just put his own signature under his. I did not ambush him. I want to be clear because a part of me wanted to see his face the moment he understood. But Denise, my lawyer, was wiser than my hurt, and she told me that the satisfaction of his face was worth nothing compared to the settlement of his lie. And she was right. Loud was his instrument, the confident performance, the reframe, the way he could make me the unreasonable one in any room. Paper was mine. It always had been. I had just forgotten it for a decade. So we did not scream. We responded to his filing the way an accountant responds to a set of cooked books, with the real ones. Denise entered the forensic accountant's report into the record. Every hidden dollar. The LLC, its formation, its balances, the transfers into it. The true valuation of the business he had tried to shrink. The money spent building another woman's life with funds that belonged to our marriage. And, laid neatly beside all of it, Mark's own sworn financial disclosure, the one that said none of it existed. The discovery process that Mark had assumed would bury me buried him instead. Because the law does not look kindly on a spouse who hides marital assets and lies to a court about them. What he had done did not just get corrected. It detonated his credibility. A judge who has caught a man lying under oath about money stops believing that man about everything, and starts, quite reasonably, wondering what else he hid. Hidden assets, once found, get pulled back into the marital estate to be divided. And a court that has seen one spouse try to cheat the other will not, generally, reward the one who tried. I will not pretend the divorce was painless, because divorce is never painless. And there were nights in there when the grief of 19 years undone was almost more than the vindication could carry. But when it was finished, I did not walk away with the scraps Mark had planned to hand me. I walked away with my honest half of everything he had spent 2 years trying to hide. The real value of the business, the funds pulled back out of the LLC and out of the life he was building with Danielle, a settlement that reflected the truth of our marriage instead of the fiction he had sworn to. My children's future was secured with money that had nearly vanished. And I walked away with something I had handed over so long ago I had almost forgotten I owned it. My own competence. My own name. Mark and I speak now only about the children, briefly, civilly, at the edges of pickups and school events. He does not quite meet my eyes anymore, and I have thought about why, and I think it is not shame exactly. I think it is that he finally sees me, the actual me, the one who was there the whole time, and he cannot forgive me for being her, because being her means he was never the smartest one in our marriage. He only got to believe he was because I let him, and the day I stopped letting him, it was already over. People who hear this story sometimes ask me if I feel triumphant, and the truth is more quiet than that. I do not feel like a woman who won. I feel like a woman who remembered who she was, in time. That is all. Mark did not lose because I was vengeful or clever or cruel. He lost because he built his entire plan on a version of me that stopped being true the day a bank statement slipped half out of an envelope, and he never once thought to check whether the woman he had underestimated for a decade might simply start paying attention again. I do the books myself now. Every account, every dollar, a spreadsheet I update on Sunday nights the way I did when we were young and poor and I was the CFO of a household that trusted me. I am never handing that over again, not to anyone, not because I cannot trust, but because I learned the hard and expensive way that the quiet competence you give away out of love can be turned into the exact blind spot someone uses against you. So I keep my own eyes on my own money now, always. He thought he had hidden everything. He had everything but the receipts. And the receipts were always going to end up in front of the one person in that marriage who knew how to read them, because I was that person before I was ever his wife, and I was still that person long after he forgot. And that's the end of this one. If it kept you up, do me one favor, hit subscribe. I tell a new story every single night, and I'd love to have you back. Good night.